Tina Weller, the Serene Stamper. In this video, I'm going to show you the basic coloring techniques for when you're making your cards. These are really easy and these are perfect if you're new to stamping, if you've never done it before or you're just getting into it, and it's something that those of us who've been stamping for quite a while take for granted. But you need to know how to color your images once you stamp them, right? So I'm going to show you how you can take your ink pads, your markers, a blender pen, and an aqua painter to color in your images. Now, if you only have ink pads, that's okay. If you only have markers, that's fine too. If you don't have an aqua painter, you can use a watercolor painting brush and some water. And if you don't have a blender pen, no problem. Now, if you do want these products, at the end of the video, there will be a link to take you to my blog, which will have all the information on how you can shop through my online store if you're in Canada, and if you're in the States, there's a link for that as well. And if you're not in North America, you can go to stampinup.com and you can find the link there so that you can buy the Stampin' Up! Products that way. So let me show you the cards that we're going to make. These are them. They're pretty, and they're all using the same stamp set. They're just colored a little bit differently. So the first card that we made is just stamping and then coloring directly with our markers onto our image. The second card was using our blender pen with our inks. The third card is using the aqua painters with our inks. And the last card is one of my favorite ways to stamp, and that's just simply using our markers directly onto our rubber stamps and then stamping down. And then what I did is I used the blender pen to pull in that color as well. So really pretty. So let's get on with the video. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you. Happy stamping. In this video, I'm going to show you basic coloring. And the stamp set that we're using, it's a Hostess stamp set from Stampin' Up! So you can't purchase this, you can only get it for free, which is even better. When you host a party with qualifying amount, you can contact me for information or go to my blog for more information on how to get this beautiful stamp set. And I chose to use this set for the cards because I liked the outline images so that I could color them in different ways. So that's the stamp set we're using. And then the ink pads that I chose to use are all from the Brights family of colors. This isn't all of them. There's a few others in this particular family of inks. But Stampin' Up! All of our colors coordinate with our cardstock, our ink refills, all of our paper, so that's what makes your cards perfect to begin with. Because if you look, our rich raspberry matches our cardstock perfectly, and it also matches our markers, and then we have ink refills, and like I said, a bunch of other embellishments where everything coordinates. So that's key to Stampin' Up! And key to easy, beautiful cards is the color coordination. So these cards, the only layering is going to be putting our Whisper White onto our card base. All of the card bases have been cut to measure 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and all of the Whisper White pieces measure 5 1/4 by 4 so that they line up perfectly on the card. Something I want to mention when you're coloring, especially when you're starting out, is the quality of the paper is key. It makes all the difference. You can have all the best inks in the world, but if you're coloring and stamping on paper that's not such good quality, you're not going to get really great results. I love the Stampin' Up! Whisper White cardstock. It's my only, I'll use our Fairy Vanilla as well and our watercolor, but this is my go-to paper. I use this all the time. I usually have 2 or 3 packages of this so that I don't run out. Alright, so you have to have good paper to stamp on for a start. Now I like to use our black StazOn ink because sometimes when I'm stamping, I don't always know if I'm going to be using water when I'm coloring or if I'm going to be using the markers direct to the paper, whichever. I haven't usually decided until it comes time to color. Whereas if I stamp with my StazOn, no matter what I decide, I know I'm okay because if I did decide to use water, it's not going to bleed. So it's just my go-to ink pad, so I like using the black StazOn. And if you've never used the black StazOn, when you get yourself a black StazOn ink pad, make sure you sniff it because it smells like almond extract. So that's pretty fun. Alright, let's go ahead and ink up our stamp. And remember, when you stamp, push down nice and steady. You don't want to wiggle it too much. So we have our nice image there. I'm going to stamp some leaves on here too, just to fill in the gaps a bit. Now I'm adding some more flowers. And I want just this little guy off in the corner a little bit. And some more foliage. I'm going to stamp my sentiment. The stamp reads, "When my mind wanders, I usually find it somewhere thinking of you," which is very pretty. Okay, I've already gone ahead and stamped a whole bunch of these, so at the end of the video, you're going to see how they all look differently depending on how we color them. The first way I'm going to color is showing you our markers direct to the paper. So our Stampin' Write markers from Stampin' Up! Have a bold tip marker, which you can tell from the bold line here. This is just one of my labels, but this bold line here will show you that this end up is the brush tip, and the skinnier line shows that this is our journaling tip. So I'm going to take the bold tip and I'm going to just go directly onto my image and just color it all in. And you can color, as you can tell, very quickly when you're using your markers like this. We can come in with our orange, color in the centers. Now if you wanted to do some shading with these markers, you could use our other color families. So like our crushed curry, our hello honey, they would all add really nice dimension. I will actually go ahead and show you that. This here is the hello honey, and you'll see it's a little bit darker, which is great because it will add that extra shading and dimension. I'm not really paying any attention where I'm putting the color. I'm not an artist, that's why I use stamps, and I know there's some really super talented people out there that I'm sure have a much better system for where to add the highlighted colors, but honestly I think it still looks really nice. So you can get away with a lot just by blending in your colors. That does look quite nice. So I will go ahead and color in the greenery and show you the finished card at the end of the video. But that's basically how you would use your markers directly to your paper. Okay, the next way I'm going to color is using our blender pens. Now the blender pens are really cool because you get 3 in a package and they're dual tip. They're exactly the same on each end. So it's like you're getting 6 pens in one package, and they last a long time. And these are odorless, they're acid free, and they just make coloring really fun, and you're not getting such an intense look as you would if you were using your markers. Now if you didn't have an ink pad, you could take your marker and a clear block and scribble onto that surface and pick up the ink with your blender pen, and then you can add your color that way, and you get a much softer look when you're using the blender pen. Now if you did have our ink pads, then you don't need to scribble your marker on a block like that, just showing you different options. Our ink pads are really cool because they're created so that when they're closed, the ink pad is lying upside down so that all of the ink goes to the top and it's not going to dry out. Now, see this puddle of ink here? That's exactly what I want. When you squeeze your ink pad like this, you're going to get a puddle of ink onto the lid, which is exactly what we want, because then we can pick that ink up with our blender pen and then continue coloring in our image. You could also go directly onto your ink pad, but it's just easier when you've got a big puddle of ink sitting in your lid. And this is another really quick way of coloring because the blender pen keeps that ink going for quite a while. It holds that ink onto the tip quite a while. When you want to go into the next color, all you do is on a piece of scrap paper, you're going to go back and forth, and then that tip will come out clean, and then it's ready to go into the next color. As it is, we are going to go into orange, so it wouldn't have mattered if I had kept the yellow on my blender pen because I'm going into a darker color anyways. But if I were using brown and then yellow, I certainly wouldn't want that brown ink to contaminate my yellow ink pad. So it's just important to clean off that tip before you go into your next color. And now I'm just adding my orange. And you can do a lot of really neat shading with the blender pen. You can go in light and then you can build on it and add more and more color until you get the intensity that you want to get. And that's one of the things I love about the blender pens. Now to do the green, I'm simply going into my old olive and just coloring in my leaves. And again, you can add deeper color by shading with the extra ink that you're putting onto your blender pen. See, and that just gives it another whole dimension that you wouldn't have had without that shading. Now if I wanted to, I could kick this up a bit and pull some of that orange into my flower. And it looks really nice again because you don't have that deep intensity that you would if you were using your markers. Now I'm going to take some of my early espresso and I'm just going to go into the center a little bit. And I've actually dabbed off when I'm dipping into my ink pad. There's quite a bit of ink on here and I don't want too much, and because it's a darker color too, I'm dabbing some of that excess ink off. So there's my card with the blender pens. Alright, for this card I'm going to use my real red and we'll squeeze it, and I'm going to take my aqua painter. Now the aqua painters are pretty cool. When you get them from Stampin' Up, you get 2 in a package. You get a bigger tip and a smaller tip, and you unscrew it and you put this underneath the tap, you fill it up with water, and you just screw it back on and you're ready to rumble. Except I was squeezing water. You don't want to do that. Alright, so now you can control the amount of water just by squeezing, and you can control how much water comes out of the tip. So it's basically, instead of having a paintbrush and a glass of water, it's all of that rolled up into one, and it controls how much water comes out, and you're not going to pull up ink. It's fantastic. Alright, so now pull this over. Now I'm dipping this into my ink. I'm squeezing out a bit more water. I don't want too much water, but I definitely want it to start flowing a bit more. There we go. So you don't want to have too much ink loaded onto your aqua painter. And if you do, just dab it onto some old rags or onto your scratch paper. Pick it up, and then you're just going to watercolor your image. There's a lot of techniques you can use with the aqua painters as well. But today I'm just going to show you this basic way of coloring. And one of the reasons why this is one of my favorite ways to color is because it's so fast. So I'm just going to add some more color just to make it a little bit more intense and add that shading. And I'm keeping this really basic and simple so that you can see that anybody can do this and everybody will look like an artist. That's the beauty of rubber stamps. Okay. So there's my flower colored. Now to clean this, you're going to go back and forth onto your scrap paper just like you did with your blender pen to remove all of the color, and then you can go back into your next color choice. So in this case, we're going into the Daffodil Delight, picking up some of that color. We're going to move on to these flowers. Going into my pumpkin pie. Now depending on how much water you squeeze out of your aqua painter and how much ink you load up, you're going to get a whole different look. So the aqua painters are definitely something you need to practice with until you're comfortable with them, but they are really, really easy to use, I promise, and they are just they're just awesome. Oh, forgot this little guy up here. Next, I'm going into my early espresso and I'm going to color in the centers. Clean off my brush by going onto the scrap paper and then Old Olive for the greenery. So even if you didn't have markers, if you had your ink pads and a paintbrush or your aqua painter or your blending pen, you've basically got your coloring mediums that you need. And again, I'm just dipping back into the color to add some deeper shades of green on my leaves. Okay. So there's that card done using the aqua painters. I know I say it a lot, but this really is one of my favorite ways of stamping. And it's using the markers directly onto the stamp. So I'm going to change gears and use a different color. We're going to use Rich Razzleberry, and as you can see, I'm just coloring directly onto my stamp. Now if I didn't want to use the rest of this image, then that's cool, because then, well, I'll show you, then I've just inked up that one part of my stamp, so I've omitted the rest. That's called omitting. But let's go ahead, ink up the whole bit, and now we're going to add our green. I'm going to go down the stem and add the leaf. And sometimes when you're finished coloring, the ink that you first applied is dried, so you need to huff on it with your breath, and that remoistens the ink. So I've huffed on it, pushed down. So you can see I've got my purple flowers with the greenery. Really cool. Now I'm going to use my marker, go over this entire image with the leaves. And fill it in a little bit. This is a different image from the same stamp set, and I'm going to use the pumpkin pie on this. And again, some green. You see, starting to fill in the color, and I haven't even colored it. So cool. And then this is yet another image from the same stamp set. So I'm going to color this with Daffodil Delight. You could, for images like this that don't have any greenery, you can go ahead and just stamp that right into your ink pad. Now this bit here, I'm just inking up the flower because I'm just going to add it just on the side here, like that, and some more greenery. Taking my early espresso, inking up the same sentiment that I used in the other cards and just stamped it in the middle. Now I could leave this as it is, or I can take my blender pen and pull in some color, and that's what I'm going to do so that you can see how just by doing that will lightly pull in the color that I've used on my stamps with my markers. Clean off your blender pen on your scrap paper and move into your next color. And I'm going to do this all the way around. So there you go, that's just inking up my stamp with markers directly onto the stamp, and then I could have left it, but I took my blender pen and just pulled the color in from the ink that I stamped. So to finish the cards, I'm just sponging into my early espresso, and I'm just going along the edges of all of these images, and it just finishes it off really, really nicely. Alright, to finish off my card, I'm going to my gorgeous grunge and I'm grabbing my dots. I'm going to ink them up in my early espresso, stamp off of my scrap paper because I don't want it to be too dark, and I'm just adding the dots just to give it some, just to fill in those empty areas. Alright, okay, so here are all my cards. This would make a beautiful little gift set, and it took no time at all. So this was the first card we made, and this was using the markers direct to the paper. This was the second card we made, and this was using our blender pens with our markers, which we scribbled onto a non-porous surface, as well as using the lids from our ink pad. This card was colored using the aqua painter and our inks. And this card was made by using our markers direct to the stamp. And then I used the blender pen and went over top of that ink to pull it into the image. So there you go. Some really basic coloring techniques that you can use for your cards. I hope that helps you. Thank you for watching my Simple Sentiment series, and happy stamping.